Okay.
Yes, please do so.
Okay. Good time of the day, everyone. We are the Armenian Economic Association, and we're happy to welcome everyone to this session dedicated to the topic, the series that we launched recently, Diaspora for Development. We have two special guests today, Nuné, Alekyan and Ruben, Vardanyan, and who probably don't need any additional introduction in the world of the Armenian diaspora and Armenian business networks. However, before we turn to proper introductions and proper sort of discussion, let me try to give you a little bit of the background on what we're doing and how everything is sort of fitting together. First of all, myself, Alexander Gevorkin, I'm one of the board members of the Armenian Economic Association, and I'm an economics professor at St. John's University in New York. My co-host today is Dr. Vladimir Asrian, who is also the board member, and he's a macroeconomist with interest in financial markets and macroeconomy, and a professor at Centro de Recerca en Economía Internacional, pardon my Spanish, and Barcelona Graduate School of Economics in Spain. Of course, we are also in presence of other board members and who are helping us organize and run this event today. Let me quickly share my screen so that I can walk you through some of the visuals that we have prepared. First of all, I should probably start with proper introduction of our group, the Armenian Economic Association, which was put together by a group of motivated economists living in Armenia, in Europe, United States, across the world. And our flagship event is the annual meeting, which is coming up this June. We hope you will be able to join us there. But in connection with the research and specifically in academic sort of field in economics, we also thought about some practical applications. And this is where diaspora has come up as one of those possible directions for practical applications and practical interests for economists. Our first event was with Vartan Marashlan, Executive Director at Repat Armenia Foundation, who helped us form the general concept of connection between the diaspora and the nation state. The second event, for the second event, we had our special guests from Ireland, Kingsley Aikins and Martin Russell, who gave a very energetic presentation on different ways of diaspora involvement and diaspora development. And Vladimir and I actually wrote up a short follow-up on this with just our personal reflections on this. So what is the diaspora, right? So this is going to be the topic of today's conversation. And I guess I should probably switch to today's event. We're hosting, again, to repeat myself, Ruben Vardanyan and Nuné Alekyan, entrepreneurs, professionals, business professionals, but also very much involved in the world of the Armenian world and the Armenian development. But from the point of view of economists and economic development specifically, we tend to associate diaspora, and let me play a role of a professor here for just a brief moment, and please be patient with me. We tend to associate diaspora with sort of remittances, that's the word, right? And indeed, as far as Armenia goes, it is one of the highest, and I just put this graph very quickly based on the data that I was able to find, right? The average remittances share of GDP. Of course, there are countries with high percentage, but this is across the former Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. So remittances do play a role, but how sustainable is that a source as far as longer term structural change? This remains to be a question that economists actually are split about. In fact, looking at the total number on the global scale of 500-600 billion in terms of remittances, people have already talked about something of a diaspora bond or that type of an instrument, which in my very personal opinion seems a little bit speculative. But because if we look at this a little bit deeper, and I'm indebted for some of the ideas around this graph to a couple of people actually in attendance today of this session, as I can see from registrations, is the following. If we look at the country's distribution and look at the total sum of foreign direct investment and remittances per capita, Armenia is actually somewhat at a lower level compared to countries with not such large diasporas, or at least stereotypically, we don't really think. For example, Estonia, which Armenia tends to be often compared with, or Czech Republic and others, right? So this sort of matters, and probably there are other factors, not just simply having a large diaspora sending money abroad, and that should somehow magically save the country, which led me to this, and this is being an economist and philosopher at the same time idea, and the only thing to really focus on here is the direction of this arrow, and this is moving sort of northeast, where everything is sort of the blissful future. And the 4 topics identified here, those are the ones that I think we could touch on today in today's conversation, and I would ask our speakers to maybe kind of share their thoughts on this. But ideally, and maybe there's something could be added here, we're thinking about social development as far as diaspora's contribution, right? The charity, the educational, the healthcare factors. There's institutional component, perhaps bringing in new sort of fresh ideas into the country's structures. Of course, the economic development. And lastly, some might argue we need repatriation, and others might argue some type of involvement is sufficient. And what we're learning from other countries also, not just from Armenia, is that there's quite a diverse palette of different connections, right? And in different ways how people living abroad and these days identified summarily as diaspora engage with their country. And this is the point. We can go deeper into the paper later if there's a desire, but this is the idea with all the different points of equilibrium, that you could be winning on one side but not necessarily on something else. So with this, I thought I'd give a very brief, and I'll stop my sharing. I thought I'd give my very brief attempt to motivate a discussion on diaspora, but within this sort of economic development context, which is all encompassing. It's not simply GDP, it's not just the level of investment or scale of investment, but it is much more, right? So, and this is why we thought that inviting Nuné and Ruben, inviting you both to this session would be very much helpful. So with this, the structure of the event will be that we have panelists, of course, as our main speakers, but we also have an audience joining us online here on Zoom and on Facebook and across the world and across different organizations. We have representatives from government, different associations, multilateral, independent researchers, and just people who are interested. So we're speaking to sort of the global group. And it is not just Armenians, but also others from non-Armenian world. So with that, maybe we could start off with having you tell us a little bit about your ongoing work. What we know is, at least what I'm familiar with, there's an interesting project that you jointly completed recently at the Crossroads. And I found that very interesting because personally, that's been on my mind, sort of what is a small country development model? And you sort of approach that. But there's a more recent project, the Future Armenian, and perhaps you could talk a little bit about that to start the conversation. And then we'll move on to some more specific questions. Also to our audience, please feel free to send in your questions and we'll try to channel them as well. So please, floor is yours. Whoever would like.
Thank you. I don't know, you want to start first? Maybe how you want to go?
I just want to make a remark before Ruben starts, because I think I'll be a force of creative destruction today. Since I'm not an economist, my economics is like Economics 101 about 20 years ago. So, and I'm very humbled to be in the presence of the economists around the world. So let me just, what I would suggest is we take a slightly bigger look. The road that Ruben and his partner have been traveling is more than 20 years old. And there's been a lot of milestones. It started with Armenia 2020. And Crossroads could not be viewed out of the context. Okay, Crossroads is just one milestone that was completed 3 years ago and was never intended as a book. So I think if we take a broader look at everything that has been done and the way the thinking behind the future of Armenia has been developing for more than the last 20 years, I think that would make sense to actually start from the back. And if Ruben tells a little bit about the recent initiative, the movement, and then we can, use Crossroads as just one of the milestones, but not the exhaustive one. Is that fair enough, Ruben?
Fine.
Let's start from the back. Let's start from something that is current.
I agree.
I'm fine. Whatever. First of all, I want to say thank you for inviting us, and to have this opportunity to we'll talk with the professional economist about something which is very important for all of us, but sometimes at the same time it's not very easy to some understand. And I'm glad we will have a professional discussion. And I want to wish all of you success what you're doing. I mean, it's very critical to keep this professional approach for analyzing what's happening in Armenia. If you heard my last interview with Vardanyan in Armenian, it will be got English subtitles and Russian subtitles very soon. I believe we have 4 critical things which we need to do as soon as possible. The first, discuss all the issues based by facts, not the myths and illusions, which we so often prefer to do. That's why one of the points is really talk about many things which we are touching during our conversation with what we're thinking is, but what is real. And remittance is one of the issues which we will talk a little bit later, but I think it's one of the critical element of creating some myths and illusions. And also some diseases and some health. The second, we need to do inventorization what we have, and what we have from point of the worldwide resources what we can use. The third element is what we need to do attestation, whom we have, because it's very critical in the current world, not only what you have, but who is the people who can you rely, because it's a competence, it's becoming one critical element of success. And the fourth element is to choose the model, which one we want to go together with the open fact-based discussion with the understanding all our limitation of resources and our advantages. And this is a project I believe we can only use to really go forward, not looking back, not trying to emotionally talk about great Armenia again, like great America again, or whatever. And when you're talking about these issues, I think we always need to keep in mind it's a 3 element which we mentioned in our book. It's a security, it's a prosperity, and identity. It's always any countries where we're talking, looking always as 3 elements and how you can find the balance. When you're talking about security, it's not only physical security, it's much broader security. It's a ecological security, it's a medical, social security, it's a long-term security, short-term security. It's like security, it's much broader, just is a physical security. The prosperity is not just GDP per capita, it's also the very important elements. Prosperity is also inside many other elements, which is not just normally you can calculate by mathematics. And identity is quite tough issue, especially for the many multinational countries. We have an advantage and disadvantage. We are one of the top 3 countries in the world where mononational structure of society, but it's anyway, we can identity. We need to understand which identity is the national identity or the state identity. In our case, we're talking about identity not only inside of the country, but also in the network. And I think one of the specific elements we need to talk is what is the relation between the state, institution, and network? What is the relation between the state and diaspora, which is can play a very significant impact for everybody we're talking about. Because we're always also mixing this understanding of what is the what is the economy of Armenia and what is the economy of Armenian nation, and how what is Armenian nation is included, because we're talking about numbers which, again, nobody knows real facts. We are, for example, we are talking about 10 million Armenians worldwide, which is guessing, because nobody did really survey and say, well, who is Armenian, by Armenian name, by Armenian passport, by Armenian roots, or whatever, and how many Armenians, for example, been in Armenia. By our best knowledge, we have indirect numbers of saying only 1.5 million Armenians outside of Armenia been in Armenia at least once. It's showing we're talking about 4 million or 5 million Armenians maximum. We're talking about 3 million Armenians in Armenia, plus 1.5 million Armenians, or 2 million Armenians who've been out at least once in Armenia. We're talking about half of the Armenians who've been at least once connected to Armenia. So it's very important, in my view, with 4 elements. It's no illusion, militarization, attestation, monitoring, with the security, identity, and prosperity. And also the understanding is new model of the state network cooperation. Can we do it or not? And this is, I think, a very critical also element for all our discussion about the future of Armenia and Armenian nation and Armenia like country. The coming back about the myths and illusion, I think is very important. What we started, we said in 15 initiatives, you can see one of the initiatives is let's talk about how we can destroy the myths and illusions. We can see this 15 goals, what we believe is very critical for our open and frank conversation. We need to really put a lot of effort, but without doing this, it will be very difficult to achieve any goals, any agreement. Because one thing I believe we need to talk is a public social contract between the state, the society, the diaspora, and Artsakh. I mean, we have 4 stakeholders, and in my view, with between these 4 elements, the contract is broken. It's broken up after 2016, and we need to find a new contract will be accepted by all 4 elements. So it's a quite complicated picture of the element which needs to be fixed at the same time. But my view, I think it's a good timing for us, because usually you can make the changes when you have free status. One, when you're okay, it's most difficult to make any changes, but some people did, like Jack Welch did in GE when the company was one of the best situation, but he made the changes despite of the good situation in the company. We've been living in Armenia in okay life until 2016. And in 2016, we got shocked and we realized the contract is broken because the deal between the state managers and the country managers and the nation was broken because they made very simple simplification of the deal. It was very simple. We are managing country the way how we want to do it. It will be some corruption, it will be some monopolization, it will be some non-transparent, but it will be okay because we will provide you security. And security not only physical, but long-term security. And the 2016, they broke this contract with the people who was living in Armenia. It also broke the contract with the diaspora, because diaspora means asked not to be interfered to Armenians' life, or the life of Armenians in Armenia. And just saying, you can give us advice, you can give us remittance, and you can give us charity, but don't do anything which when we're not asking you to help us. So I think in Artsakh, it also was very clear the problem of Artsakh become headache with people said we need to find a solution of this problem, but it's not our problem. How we can find somebody who will take care of this problem, not us. So I would say it's the broken of the contract. I think it was a very critical element for whatever happened today. So we're doing this future Armenian, putting this 15 goals or 15 directions which we need to discuss. Someone very easy to understand directly mentioned, for example, the Armenian diaspora unity, or free Artsakh, or exponential growth, or growing population. But some of them is more complicated, with good governance, or preserved heritage, or evidence-based decision-making process. I think it's all questions which we need to raise and talk. And so in my view, when we're talking about all these complicated issues, we need to start say, okay, where is the number one step we need to do? For me, number one step, whatever we're talking is, will be rebuilding the social contract between these 4 stakeholders, and clearly get acceptance from all 4 elements that we agree about what happened with us. And I think it's very difficult because it's not easy to find a balance between the interests of 4 elements that we're talking about. The second is really do is myths and illusions, get out these myths and illusions, and really build the evidence base and fact base. For example, Alexander, you mentioned about remittance, and I think it's a very good point we started. We are finishing work with McKinsey, and we hope we can publish the materials by end of the May. It's showing with Moldova, we are two countries in post-Soviet Union republics. We basically 87% money is spending to the weddings, the eatings, and like I was saying, is I'm sorry for my English, for toilets. Basically, it's knowing money is coming. It's not a question how much money is coming, but how money was used is very critical also. And the money most is coming to Armenia is to spend and spending now also to just keeping life and not doing any investment. And if you're doing investment, it's again is not very good in a business model because people not calculate capex, they don't calculate any amortization, depreciation, and most of this business is built by not full transparent and full professional approach. So it's not only a question it's a good or bad remittance and how much is remittance compared, but it's how this money was used and what is the value creation happening with this money. It's a big question for all of us. And it's why, for example, because of what's happened, we've been doing also our miniaturization. It was very interesting to look ourselves because it's very easy to criticize. My family with my friends and partners, we totally put in a charity and remittance type of the projects, $480 million during the last 20 years. And only $80 million we put in a business type of projects, okay? $100 million, you can say some social impact. But we're talking basically unequal proportion of the money went to the charity and philanthropic side. And it's a 700 project we've been realizing, and only 10 projects is commercial, and all other is not commercial. Basically, we have a significant disproportion of the people who know us from the beginning this is not good. We knew that from the beginning it will be very important to keep this balance between the charity activity but because we've been so in a bad shape situation, because we've been thinking not be interfering with the economic and political situation in Armenia, we went following the deal between the SPURC and state when we will not be involved in any day-by-day activity. We basically accept the bank and run a real estate project. We've been out of the entire situation we have in Armenia. But this is just one example showing how dangerous what we've been doing the last 20 years. And I think it's no peace, no war model, which was chosen by previous management of the country, manager of the country, really create one of the challenges for all of us because we've been accepting this model, but it's one of the most biggest mistakes we made in our decision-making process because we've been doing the businesses or developing some of the project without considering what will be the solution of the situation, which was most critical for the nation. And anyway, I want to stop here because I can talk hours. I want to give the floor for people also maybe talk about it. But I hope I get a big picture about what is.
This is very interesting and very important. And I remember. Okay, so I remember when you launched you and Nubar launched 2020, and how exciting sort of the general framework was around it and the mood around it back then. Right, and that to me seems to be an example of leading towards this public social contract, which is a very important outcome of stable economies, as one could say. Right. The question is how we approach this in the context of in the Armenian context, where we have historically determined. Right. Let's try to stay away from other factors, but historically, objectively determined. Differences. I mean, going back to diaspora and economics, or the economic effect of diaspora, we have large businesses, right, within the diaspora on both sides of the Atlantic. So really, one of our biggest questions is to, I guess, you both, or I don't know, Ruben, if you might be more inclined to take this one, is how do we bridge the two to begin with, or do we even need to? Because it might be just the diversity of initiatives that's what's needed in Armenia right now. And diaspora business coming from Russia, diaspora business coming from the United States, and all converging in Armenia. Is that a possible sustainable approach?
Like I said, I think it's a unique time because we've been okay situation and we couldn't make the changes. We've been in very positive wave of the hope of the changes, and it's failed and been great disappointment. Now we are emotionally very negative attitude. And I think it's a good time to make real changes because it's a readiness of everyone. But I think it's critical for us again to find where is the deal broker, where is the deal breaker for everyone, because we can talk about many things that needs to be solved today in Armenia. But I feel to say we have again, coming back from my point that I want to mention, without rebuilding, re-signing, re-agree the contract between the diaspora, and diaspora is different layers also. When talking about diaspora, we need to understand we have at least 4 types of diaspora inside of diaspora. We have people who are holding Armenian passport, and they left Armenia, and they have no rights to vote, and they have no rights to be part of Armenian. And this is one of the key questions: do we will give it right or not, and when it will get right, and what will be their duties to be part of the Armenian law. The second, we have Armenians who left Armenia in the Soviet time, or left like myself, and they're not Armenian passport, they have Armenian roots, but they don't have Armenian passport. The third is Armenians from Western Armenia have no roots with Armenia, and but they are feeling they're Armenian, they're carrying Armenian issues. And the fourth, which is also very small now percentage of Armenian, but it's people who've been living like in Iran or in Georgia, for example, Syria, and they not consider themselves the pure because they believe they're living in their own homeland, or they're living in the lands where they've been grew up and they've never been hundreds of years. So I'm talking about, for example, the spure relationship with the government. It needs to be clarified. This very important element. What kind of spure we're talking. Coming back, the point that I want to make again, without rebuilding this model or the deal between these 4 elements, I don't think we can talk about what the spure investment will be working. Because if we're going back to the model of where the spure can advise, can do philanthropy and remittance, it doesn't matter. It's coming from Russia, or coming from America, or from anywhere. The model will be: we have a clause, basically a reservation of Armenian tradition in entity places, where it's like Belarus or Abkhazia. In Belarus, Russians cannot do investment. Despite they sponsor and support Belarus, they cannot do any investment in Belarus because it's a clause for only Belarusians. The same in Abkhazia. Abkhazia fully depends from Russia, but they cannot do anything, and Russians cannot buy any real estate in Abkhazia. This is why, without clear, non-binding signed agreement, but public accepted agreement between these 4 stakeholders, I don't think we can really discuss any more sub-projects or whatever sub-level of the issues that you want to talk. The other issue, I think, is very critical: the Artsakh-Russia relationship, which is now it's clearly it needs to be defined. Like the Artsakh needs to find a way to get the status and to get the legal mechanism to get the security from Russia for next 20 years, not for 5 years. And without answering this question, we cannot talk about why we're building 3,000 apartments in Artsakh if this question will not be solved, or it will be not number 1 priority for everyone who is involved in this subject. That's why we have a couple core elements which, without answering them, and for example, the answer which model we want to go, close or open. Basically, we have 3 key questions. It's a open society, open country, or closed country, and both have pluses and minuses. Are we a revanche, or are we trying to become strong and getting some cooperation or whatever we can, collaboration with the neighbors or not? This is including opening the border with Turkey, signing a deal with Azerbaijan, and trying to rethink about this. And it doesn't mean we give up the opportunity to return back some of the core for us elements like Artsakh issue. But I'm just saying, are we talking about 2 models? One model, we are preparing for our next war, and if everything possible to get next war will be stronger, but we can, using the war, win, or we can get the other model to get back what we want to get without war, but we need to understand what it means. And the third element, are we living in Armenia by law, or are we living by Armenia by adatner, or I don't know, haskatsovutuner, whatever we can name it. It's a not legal type of the mechanism of decision making, where you can, because this three elements will bring more investment from non-Armenians to Armenia or less. It will be more investment from Spirk or less. It will be more or less people who will move to Armenia for different reasons. Because, for example, if we can build close country with very strong national identity preservation, maybe many retirement people will want to go to Armenia and to feel that they can keep their own identity and feel, and we can provide for security from Russia or for I don't know, whatever. We'll find a solution to provide security for Armenia physical. Maybe people who retire will go, but people who are doing businesses in the young generation, 25 plus and 35 plus, will not go this place. That's why, for my point of view, it's critical to answer this quick question: which model? And answering this quick question: which is contract, and what is the core element of this contract will be? Opening border with Turkey, peace with Azerbaijan, at least the peace which will be allowing us to do something and during the time, or not, or we can keep the status quo like it was with Azerbaijan from 1994. Again, I'm not saying I'm in favor. I'm just saying we need to openly and professionally talk about it. Maybe not publicly, because not all these questions need to be discussed public, but it needs to be discussed professionally and very deep and honest. So in my view, without these elements, without, for example, what could be relation with Russia, are we signing the contract to become part of the new Soviet Union, or whatever we name it? It will be also a good question for answer open and transparent. Are we becoming part of the Eurasian Union and this status? Are we going deeper and more stronger interdependence or dependence from Russia? I think this is a very important question that needs to be answered and needs to be discussed, and I prefer to do this despite it's difficult and challenging to talk about this.
Yeah, Nuné, I think, would you like to add anything?
Yes, I would like to actually reiterate further on what Ruben has been saying about the importance of the social contract. The fact is that Armenia is not the only country and nation in the world that undergoes the significant transformation of the social contract. After COVID, especially, you all live in different countries, and I think you see in your own countries the debate about the changes to the social contract, the future of the welfare state as it is in the UK, the nature of taxation, etc., etc. I mean, we are part of that debate of the countries that we're living in. The difficulty of the Armenia today is that we don't have the institutions that actually carry on that debate in order for the new social contract to emerge. Within Armenia, we don't have the developed institutions of the civil society. Ruben, correct me if I'm wrong. We've got a double jeopardy, is that we're not just setting up the social contract, the new revising social contract for the citizens of Armenia and the Armenian state. We're also dealing with the diaspora that, as Ruben said, we have not inventorized. We have not any attestation or understanding who Armenians are, where they're located, what they know, what they don't know, how engaged they are, do they actually want to be engaged. There are no single institution, and I'm not saying that there should be a diaspora that be a stakeholder in the evaluating the existing social contract. So Future Armenians is actually an attempt, and Ruben, correct me if I'm wrong, to actually bring in people together who actually want to take part in that process of setting up and being a part of the discussion about the new social contract. Because what the social contract that basically is ruined today, and the one that we've lived with for 20 years, it was in a way imposed on us. Diaspora was not part of setting up the terms 20 years ago of that contract. That contract was formed within the country, and it was basically, okay, these are the rules, you play, you give us the money, you do certain things. We are not going to prosecute you as it some of the countries do. You're free to do your projects. So diaspora has been given a lot of freedom as part of that deal, but you're not part of actually negotiating that contract. Either you agree with it or you don't. So the question now, can we establish some kind of a network mechanism for being part in this formation of this new social contract? Thank you.
Thank you very much. This actually leads well to Vladimir. I think you have a very specific question about the diaspora. So.
Yes, actually, to both of you, I wanted to ask a question. So in many of your interviews, also today, we touched upon this idea of the diaspora, but and potential of the diaspora, but I often hear both from academics, also in Armenia, I would say from officials as well, it's not so clear what diaspora is. As you said, we don't know what we have, financial, human capital, what brains we have, but yet there's some kind of demand for an increased level of engagement. Have you actually attempted, or do you think are there steps to actually go ahead and try to measure this potential of the diaspora? So right now, if imagine someone in Armenia wants to rise up on a platform of engaging the diaspora, who are they dealing with? Who are the stakeholders whom to actually start this dialogue?
I think you're touching very important point, because we have a couple challenges like we all just discussed now. We don't have what this diaspora is and how many of them is part of the diaspora. We also don't have institutions who can represent diaspora, and I have a high respect to AGBU or to some of the parties who have a representation in diaspora, but we're not representing anymore all the diaspora layers, and this is, I think, one of the challenges. And also we have our own mandate, which has limited them to be part of some bigger discussions in social economic development. And then they also need to be reformed themselves, because we are old school type of the institutions, which is why we have a challenge of the institutions. Who can be representing the diaspora in different country level or in a global level. And I'm sure it's one of the, it was why in one of our 15 points, we said we need to have a strong diaspora institutions and into reforming them to be sure we get real counterpartners. The other issue I think is very also important, what we need to take in consideration when we're talking about diaspora. We're always talking about diaspora helping Armenia, but in my view, we need to seriously consider the same equal mutualism, and the diaspora will be helped by Armenia also. I think without this, we cannot talk about mutual conversion and mutual support, because all these models when diaspora must help Armenia is a weak model, and we need to talk about models which will be in two-side streets. The third point also we need to understand, when you're talking about diaspora, we're looking like it's a network, but it's not a network. Maybe our Nubar and my own, our model is very unusual success model of the people we didn't know each other before we met in Harvard in 2001. We become friends and partners only because we share the same vision and same type of the understanding of the challenges we're facing in Armenian nation. But this is very unusual example. Usually in Glendale, for example, people from Iran, Armenian from Iran, Armenian from Beirut, and Armenians from Russia, we don't talk to each other. We don't know each other. And the same in Krasnodar. When you go in Krasnodar, you'll find 4 Armenians in 4 different Armenian communities, which we not interact at all to each other. So I think it's a 3 elements which we need to consider very seriously. First, reforming and reorganizing the diaspora institution, using the technology, using the old opportunity now we have because of the new technology, give us really some interesting channels of the access to the people's view and really understanding what kind of the numbers we're talking, about whom we are talking. Second, to really spend seriously to understand how we can have a two-side street. And the third, how we can take out this Gautain ghetto type of mentality from Armenian diaspora, the same like we're talking about Armenia. Because it's a very strong illusion and myth that we have, but we have a very strong network. It's a network, have a quite better result compared to many other nations, but we are definitely not in the most efficient network in the world that we can become. What we have, because we have a, by the way, I want to mention, maybe Alexander and others know, but not so many nations have a diaspora in 100 countries. It's not only, it's again, it's quite unusual spread around the world what we have. And this is quite unique. And we have also quite unique capacity to keep our identity, but being accepted by other nationals quite well. And this is, I think we have some advantages. We don't need to talk only about negative side, but positive side also.
I think we can compete with the Irish only. But what's interesting, and I don't see our friends from Ireland on the call, but what is interesting in that example is that, for example, even in Scotland, people just woke up recently, oh, global Scots, and let's leverage that potential. And it's very practical, of course. It's hard to compare one-to-one Armenia to Ireland or Scotland, but the approach is very practical, but also at the same time very similar. There's appeal to the sort of the patriotic connection, altruism. There's much flexibility in terms of how, Ruben, what you talked about being open and somebody from diaspora easily coming to Armenia, in terms of transactions, right? Transactional openness. There's quite a bit of flexibility in those countries. And they focused on drawing the investment. But this is where there's another question. Should we be open just to, again, maybe I'm repeating my idea earlier, should we be open to all, just everyone who can come to Armenia now? Or would there be a preference for a more targeted approach? We need IT specialists, or we need people who can work in agriculture. Because there's also another question in the Armenian context, and that's repatriation. I'm not sure if you have any ideas on that, how that may be significant for sort of overall economic effect. Assuming, let's for a moment, let's assume we should, as far as academics go, we should probably allow an assumption that we are able to come to a comfortable sort of social contract, the one you talked about earlier. So if that is done, sort of what is the next step? Should we encourage all out repatriation? Should we figure out the ways to promote business networks? Your thoughts?
I want to say I won't send a very strong message. I am confident by 100%, without any doubt, without big wave of migration back to Armenia, we cannot change country. And when I'm talking about big wave of migration back to Armenia, it means we need to organize this without looking which professions. We're saying we need to change mental behavior in Armenia, because we have one of the serious challenges, not enough energy, not enough demand to transformation or to change. So in my view, the taxi driver from Glendale or LA or from Moscow will come back to Armenia. It will bring some changes either, like we saw in the Syrian refugees who came in Armenia, and they changed the culture of a restaurant. That's why I believe at least 50,000 families, which we're talking about 150,000, 200,000 people, needs to come back to Armenia. If we are talking about 1.5, 2 million people overall who engage in Armenia, we're talking about 10%, which is quite a big number, okay? So I'm confident without this wave of migration, people who will migrate back, we cannot make any changes. And it needs to become without any conditions. It needs to come with the people who say, we will come back only if it will be a new government, or it will come back only if it will be no corruption or whatever. It's bullshit. I'm sorry for my English. It will not work. We need to come and we need to create the changes together. It needs to go in parallel. The transformation needs to happen at the same time when people are coming back. It's very difficult. It's not easy. But it's emotional negative situation which giving us chance to engage people. That's why I'm strongly encouraging all of us to think about how we can engage people to really come back to Armenia and make the transformation changes. This is no other chance for Armenians to become different. And this is my strong view. I'm very confident about this. The other point, what you can see because of technology, 4 or 5 different ways how people can work and live in Armenia without giving very big commitment. One is, like I said, they need to come back without any conditions. The other, people can come and say, you know what, if you create me tax regime, I can work worldwide, but I will pay fixed tax and I will be using Armenia like residence, like Switzerland. I will come and do businesses and be Armenian or Armenian. The third problem, people say, you know what, I will work from online, from remote regime, from Virginia or from the Leipzig, but I will spend 3 months a year in Armenia, and this is my commitment, and this will be type of thing, it will be legally binding commitment. The other element, people say, no, I'm not coming, but I'm spending 10% of my revenue to the special fund who will do development. And as I think it's very important to understand, this is the type of things which you need to accept. It needs strong commitment. It cannot be just any more voluntary. It needs to be the way we will really say it's my duty. I think it's a good element of what's happening with the war and after war. We're feeling it's we have no other option. We need to say it's a black or white. Or I'm committed, or I'm Armenian and I'm care about in Armenia, or I don't care, and it's just fine. We have many Armenians who are, or people who has Armenian roots but they don't feel Armenian. And it's a their choice, and you cannot convince them to feel that they're doing something wrong. And we have some Armenians, but we will be surprisingly, people who have 1/4 Armenian, or they've never been in Armenia, they didn't talk any one word Armenian, they feel that they're Armenian, they want to help Armenia. That's why we both decision will go in both directions. That's why I'm quite confident 50,000 families at least, 150 to 1,000 people needs to move to Armenia, bringing new culture and new attitude like it happened in 1946, 1952, when the many Middle East Armenian came from Greece, from Lebanon, from Syria, and then to Armenia. And it needs to include some professional people, some retired people, some, it will be different, but we don't need to put any segregation or a specific requirement. It needs to be just done because it needs to be done without any specific elements inside, in my view.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Nuné, did you want to add anything?
Yes. Basically, I think I might be wrong, but in my mind, when I hear word repatriation, I think of the government policy. We tend to think of the process of repatriation as something that is driven by the state for the benefit of the state and the country. We had at least 3 different, in the last 100 years, 3 different types of repatriations to Armenia. Only the first one, to my knowledge, has been a success. And the first one when, their government of young Armenian Second Republic picked specifically talented, gifted professionals, brought them to Armenia, gave them work, gave them the opportunities, and as a result, we have enormous amount of knowledge and assets and culture built in Armenia. And that was done literally by 100 people. Okay, so this is a type of the repatriation that is usually driven by the government. But I think we're living in a different world today. That kind of repatriation requires amazing anchor projects in Armenia that should not necessarily have to be government driven. And in fact, most probably not government driven, because no government has an ambition to projects that would attract people like Alexander Tamayan, but on the modern age. Okay, so I think we need to kind of forget that repatriation is the monopoly of the state. As a network, we need to think, what can we do to get the repatriation back? And I agree with Ruben, we shouldn't be selective whom we should invite. I think because we're at the stage that we need pretty much everyone. But at the same time, the question then goes, if you're anything like me, I think that I'm patriotic, but I'm extremely pragmatic as well. And you're the economist. What is the benefit to you as a human being of actually relocating full-time, part-time to Armenia? Why do you want to be Armenian? I think this is a question that, everyone has to ask. If we actually get to the point where every one of us asks that question to ourselves, then we probably will get closer to actually considering the opportunity of higher level of engagement with Armenia, likely moving to Armenia. But I think it's the personal responsibility at this day and age that we need to ask ourselves. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So if I may summarize just a little bit, because Nuné, what you just mentioned also speaks, and calling on economists, we tend to think in very material terms, right? Maximizing utilities and so on. But that doesn't really have to be expressed in material or monetary terms. There's also the concept of altruism and sort of self-fulfillment. No? Well, what I mean is that that's how what could be one motivating factor.
I agree with you. It's a very important emotional feelings, but I will say you honestly, I don't believe, despite its emotions, paying very role, it will be enough to create this big wave. But what I believe, I'm sorry to interrupting your comments, but it's very important. We living in a world with a huge turbulence. People becoming very concerned about the future of America, future of Lebanon, future of Russia, future about Ukraine. Look, we have countries who are under serious, it's not only Armenian and then Turkey is under big transformation. Azerbaijan will be under big transformation, I'm sure, very soon, because the model is very unstable. What we have in Sultanate cannot stay forever. Again, it's illusion what we have. So I think we are living in a world with not only economic comfort or profitability will put people, it's not only emotional because you're Armenian, but because of the security issue and because of the understanding where I can feel at least more safer. It doesn't mean that I will be safe, but more safer compared to that will be. And it's a good question. And some people say, you know what, I will go New Zealand, or I'll go Fiji Island, or I will go Argentina, or I will stay until end in Lebanon, despite all what's happening in Lebanon or Syria. Or some people say, you know what, better to come in my homeland and build this, despite all Turkey, Azerbaijan, despite all the small, weak country. It will be better if I will die in Armenia, not by other places. So why I interrupt you, because it's not only about emotional versus the economic pragmatic, it's a security is also. So I'm saying it's a free element, identity, prosperity, and security. And identity will bring us here, but not enough. Prosperity is a very limited issues which people will come without real transformation of the tax system. But security surprisingly can become issue if people will come to Armenia, in my view.
Yeah, I was speaking more about the individual motivation, and I agree. It's sort of altruism, the emotional is part of it, but it's not really the central. But still, it matters, I think, in some decisions. But in general, I think what we're talking about is evolution of some type of engagement infrastructure between Armenia and diaspora, some type of pragmatic. I think of have an analogy of a street, right? It goes two directions. What you mentioned about it's not just diaspora helping Armenia, but actually Armenia influencing diaspora or supporting the diaspora networks. That's also, I think, is an important factor. We find examples of this in other countries, by the way, from Moldova to Poland to even Estonia, which offers virtual European Union citizenship. So you talked about being the ability to start a business. But with all these comments, I think we're in the framework that you brought up, open versus closed model. We're leaning towards more open model, which I don't mind. But it also
Armenians inside Armenia not voting. By the way, if you look at all the survey we're doing in Armenia, is reconfirming what most Armenians prefer to have a closed capsule type of the preservation place where we can get some sponsor who provide them money. It's a Spurk or Russia or US, it doesn't matter which, but it may not interfere in internal life of the web. So when talking we are ready for open, it doesn't mean it. So I say without bringing diaspora back to our Armenia, you cannot make change mentality in Armenia, whereas most of the people voting with understanding or without understanding what we're doing, it's a foreclosed type of society.
Yeah. But of course, then we run into the differences and contradictions within the diaspora. What you mentioned about, well, something about in one city having Armenians from 4 different backgrounds and neither of them is talking to each other is also quite often happens. So we have a few questions and comments from the audience. So there's one which came in very early in the conversation from Ruben and Jikan. I just want to acknowledge that The question is to propose to future Armenians and us, Armenian Economic Association, to think about creation Armenian Development Institute, a think tank producing annual Armenian Development Report, presenting annual Armenian Development Forum, and it will come up with assessment of government policies, institutions, as well as private sector and civil society performance. It's an interesting idea, sort of taking stock of, inventorization, as you say, of what's going on.
Yeah, we're trying to, but we agree. I know Ruben very well, and I respect him highly, but it's exactly what we've been talking many years already. It's a question how you can organize and who needs to be organized. And we have a future studio think tank, which David Vardanyan is running. And we are trying to issue some material, and we hope we can create a platform for the Armenia 2041 concept will start to become a driver of the transformation. Exactly, this is what we need. But we need one more element, for example. We have Armenian Institute of Public Policies because we have no bureaucrats. We don't. Not only we have a macroeconomic, for example, we have a big challenge of the macroeconomists and the people understand, but we have a big challenge about state managers because we don't have this. We need to create a very strong institution for preparing the military officers because we don't have it in a high level, and this is not acceptable because we need to have that's why we need to have a public servant, we need to have a military servant, we need to have an economist, we need to have a diplomat, which we also have a quite weak preparation. That's why we have 3 or 4 core areas which we need to put significant efforts to develop if we want to achieve some result. And of course, for example, we have a science technology. We need to bring deans and rectors from international to running Armenian universities because inside of Armenia, unfortunately, by all my respect, people who've been saying we don't have enough strong academics who can become really brand name worldwide to attract best scientists and best students. Right? We're talking about not only one public, we're talking about at least from 5 to 7 core elements that needs to be, I would say, science, technology, healthcare, education themselves, the military, foreign policies, public policies, and macroeconomics. So I will say it's exactly areas where it needs to put a lot of effort.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I can talk for days on development of science and education and helping students in many ways as in terms of acquiring education and going through the sort of competitive educational processes, but also supporting research. I think this is something that diaspora organizations are well positioned to maybe tackle, especially the established ones, and broaden their efforts. Okay, I asked questions if somebody wants because we have several questions in the chat, so I'll go in the order that received. I'm going to try to unmute people and give them an opportunity to ask the question. So Gaine, all right, you should be able to ask your question now.
Okay, thank you very much. Earlier, Mr. Vardanyan was discussing some options for us, and I think I heard, do we want peace or war with neighbors? But this is a little puzzling for me, not even a little. Azerbaijan is preparing for the next war as we speak, whether we want it or not. And this war that we had that started in September, it was forced on us. It was not up to us. So they have very concrete plans to capture and occupy more of the Republic of Armenia, and particularly Syunik, which is their next goal. They are working on it currently. Azerbaijan and Turkey are openly talking about this and acting in that direction. So I really don't understand the question whether we want war or peace with neighbors. Should we not get ready for a war, at least to defend ourselves and maybe prevent a new attack? I understand if the question is about long term, but we have to focus on the short term. We cannot think about war and peace if our enemy is preparing and planning a war. We have to prepare for a war.
What is your profession, Diana? Are you an economist or are you a political science? What are you doing?
I'm an economist and I'm specialized in financial economics. Thank you.
Super. I'm very glad to hear what you're an economist. And let's put aside our emotions and let's look the numbers and let's look the solutions, because otherwise it's all is speculations. I'm sorry to be blind and straightforward. When you're talking, we need to prepare for the war. I'm telling you now that now I know how this public goes, but I have no inside information. It's not I'm doing any secret. To rebuild our army today, we need to get at least $3 billion to recover what we've been lost. Okay, to have a like Israel to Panzer, which will defend us, we need to get from $8 to $12 billion money and smart money and doing the development of the science technology. When I'm talking about war and peace, I'm not saying we need to sign any deal with, again, but what we're talking about, we need to seriously understand what is the price and what is the resources we have to make these efforts. And last 30 years, we did something which I believe one of the biggest mistakes, when no war, no peace situation was allowed Azerbaijan to become stronger and he had to fight with us. Because I know how many people who listening to his conversations from Armenia, but in Armenia, when you're doing the fight, you usually have two options. One option, if you beat somebody, you're doing the custom, you're trying to pick the peace when you're strong, or you need to keep yourself so strong that nobody wants to have a war with you anymore. That's why when we spent most of the money Armenian oligarchs earned to building hotels, restaurants, and tourist center, for me was this exactly wrong approach to no peace, no war approach, which was killed us because we didn't spend money which people was stolen from the state budget or with other international money to build military private companies who produce drones. We've been doing hotels because I don't know what way was my mentality, but they thought it would be the solution for this. When I'm saying about war or peace, I'm saying very simple. Or we are trying to build very strong economy in Armenia with the mechanism which will not allow Azerbaijan and Turkey make the war with us. It will be Russia, it will be the United States, it will be France. I know what will be deal with, because we need to have partners with which will allow us to feel strong, we can have economic development and try to, whatever we request from both sides, try to slowly build collaboration, understanding that there's no peace agreement yet, and we need to keep this in mind. Or we say, you know what, no, we continue keeping the border closed, we continue making everything is like we were preparing for the war, which again, I'm not against, I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just saying it's different model, again. And like economists, let's not to be, you know, in Russia, I don't want to say in English, шапка закидательства. It's enough for us to talk about something which we don't understand. There's the numbers, okay? Or we and how quickly we can rebuild our army, and what we have with our officer is a request significant investment. If we are not ready to put this money immediately in the, and we need to not only money but spending real efforts to build this type of army in a 6 months time, what you're talking is we're already dead in this case, because if the war is coming and Turkey and Azerbaijan wants to take Syunik tomorrow, we don't have army now which can be defended us, in my view. Maybe I'm wrong, and I hope I will be glad to hear that I'm wrong and our army can defend. But in my view, without real reform of the army, without really significant investment in the army, without real significant technical equipment, mindset changes. Again, when you war with joysticks, I was 4 times in Stepanakert during the war. Okay, it was the war between the like Bujoni in the horses against the tanks. It was the same war now with the joysticks and electronics against the young boys who've been just sent to die because we had a war without understanding what is the war really. So I respect what you're saying, and I respect what you write about the danger that our neighbors will never give up to idea to clean up Armenia from Armenians, but it doesn't mean that we need to have a not different strategies of how we want to defend ourselves. It's not like one option, because an option of the being revenge is not saying, by the way, the peace doesn't mean there needs to be peace by any condition, and peace doesn't mean we need to have a strong army who will be not allowing them to open the war again. It's not like this. Don't me understand wrong.
Thank you. I think both the question and the answer address a couple of other questions that we had in the chat, and sort of in general, it's a question that had to be sort of discussed, I think, inevitably these days. But because I think we're over our more or less agreed time, so, and I don't want to, and I know people have other things to do. So just to come back to Diaspora and Diaspora for Development specifically, and also kind of combining several questions that have been brought up in the chat. Well, we do have these diverse types of diaspora. We do have how many one counts, 4, and then some people tend to say that those who migrated in the 90s are not the diaspora, they're just migrants. So we can get into many classifications. The point is that it's a very diverse group. So how can we expect some unified action from this group? And who should make the first step? I'm always, depending on which audience I talk personally, I tell them they have to make the first step. If I'm speaking to a diaspora audience, organizations, you guys move first. In Armenia, you guys move first. But what are your thoughts on this?
In my thought, it's elite. It's a responsibility of the people who has a right to make decisions. And it doesn't need to be official people making only official decisions. It doesn't need to be only military leaders, but it also needs to be culture leader, scientific leader, or business leader, but needs to come together and talk about this very seriously. And coming back again, one thing I forgot again to mention: if we believe it's a time now about the preparing to war, call to action very simple. All the men and all the women need to go army now, and we need to create the mandatory army, not for only 18 years old, like in Switzerland. Every 1 month, the people need to go to war, and the women. And in diaspora, we need to create a mechanism where people from diaspora will come and serve, who want to be part of Armenia, maybe for not for 2 years, but for 1 year. I'm just saying it cannot be just emotional screaming. We need to make actions. And if it's actions to prepare to the war, and you believe this is the important, and we will agree all this is the important, the call to action is very simple. You know what, guys? Don't sit in Paris or Moscow and talking about the war is coming. Come here and serve an army if you want to defend it. And it will see how mobilization work or not. And not talk about only 18 years old boys will go to die because nobody preparing them. Let's bring the best specialists and train them as soon as possible. So coming back is a responsibility for all of us. You're right. At the same time, it's a responsibility for elite who has resources. And resources not only money and not only power, but also the leadership skills. I mean, the competence of the leadership becoming very critical 21st century. It's a very many of young people, age of 25, 35 years old plus, but becoming successful without getting big factories or without being great usual type of the managers, but they've been leaders who can take responsibility and build something which nobody thought can be built, right? That's why I mean the leadership skills, this is one of the key elements of the future of success of Armenian nation. So I believe the people who feeling inside themselves they have a energy, patience, and desire to really put their life under risk to the future of Armenia and Armenian nation, may need to take responsibility. And maybe individuals from different areas, can be young or old people, but they need to come together. There's no other option. As a call to action today is so critical. So I will say, I'm ready to, and I'm talking very openly. I'm trying sometimes very provocative, and I'm talking especially to be creating more black and white approach for the type of the situation, which is, of course, is very unpleasant and someone creating a lot of questions, but I don't feel otherwise because I believe we lost the moment of the positive wave. We lost the moment of the okay lives, and we are now on a negative wave of emotions, which we all worry about the future. If we lose this momentum also, we really have a serious danger to lose Armenian nation in the long term.
Yeah, no, actually, it makes sense even to academic economists, or at least it should, because what you're saying is what probably Nassim Taleb would call having skin in the game. That someone, if sort of you preach one thing, you must show somehow that you're part of that movement, whatever it might be. In financial markets, it's taking the risks and so on. But what also seems to be sort of summarizing all the remarks that have been made, and also reflecting on my own experience working with diaspora and researching diaspora, is that just like also an analogy from economics, Hyman Minsky wrote about how stability could be destabilizing, how financial markets tend to fall into comfort zone and start taking on risk without really realizing what risks they're bringing on. And the same could be a characteristic of, I guess, any diaspora movement, not just unique to Armenia. And now this is why it's so crucial to understand how that fits into the economic development as well now. So I will give you an opportunity, maybe last, I don't see any questions. I think we've answered all of them. So Nuné, Ruben, if you have any parting words, wisdom.
Well, words of wisdom, I expect too much, but I think Anna asked a very difficult question, and thank you, Ruben, for answering it. All I can add, because I know it is a burning issue, is I think we need to have a very deep discussion. What is our set of values? Is land more valuable to us than the Armenian life? And I think the question is, this is something that came through the discussions with Azerbaijani politology, about the studio, follow the Future Studio discussion platform as well, because we ask very provocative questions. You know, if you as a human being, as an Armenian, value Armenian life, where would you spend that $12 billion Ruben mentioned on making Armenian life healthy, wealthy, prosperous, full of ambitions and ability to actually materialize it, ensuring the recognition of Artsakh as an independent territory over the next 10 years? Or would you spend that money and all your efforts, that means neglecting the education and healthcare, because, you know, money will go into the war machine, to retake the land? This is I don't have an answer. Okay, this is a question that no one has an answer, but that is a question that needs to be openly discussed, because the answer, the consensus, the sufficient consensus to this answer will basically form part of the social contract that we've started to talk about. Because every nation wants a revenge after the failure. I mean, we're not unique in that. The question is, how do we define revenge? Is taking a land a revenge, or a prosperous, healthy, young generation of Armenians that aspire to do whatever and reach high and fly beyond the stars? Thank you.
Oh, Nuné touched one of the most difficult questions for us, our nation. We are a unique nation. We had 13 capitals. We built our last kingdom in Kilikia, where it was no basically Armenian roots enough close. We can talk about Great Armenian that even met some, but it was not very Armenian, been always living. We had an opportunity, unique skills to build Armenia any place we're going, with building one church and one school, and keeping ourselves our identity, from Hong Kong to LA, from Cordoba, where we have our university, to Poland. And the question, what is our motherland and what is the historical part what we need to keep, I think it's very critical. I believe we need to fight for the land. I believe we need to fight for our territory. I believe Artsakh is crucial for us. We have a disagreement with Nuné here, it's fine. Because Artsakh for me is one of the unique places in the Armenian history and today's situation, where we have Armenians been living there from thousands of years, and keeping Artsakh Armenian is critical for the future of Armenia. And for this, it's worth to lose the lives of the people. And I'm fortunate to say this is not the easy face to say, but it's important to understand this. Why to losing Dadivang or to losing Andasar is not only the losing church or monastery, but the losing place where we have people been living on thousands years and keep our Armenian DNA. This is why, for me, it's very critical to have this discussion. I agree with Nuné, there's some good arguments about different positions, which I respect. Again, we have been partners, but with different views about this, and it's just fine, absolutely. It's partially also because maybe the gender differences also create some different approach to what is the war, what is the peace. But I would say it's to be ready to die for your homeland. It's a very critical point for my view, to define what is my homeland and what is the area. Is Vahar Shapat Eshmiadzin. It's any place where Armenian is living. Where is the difference between the Javakh or Krasnodar and Armenia and Artsakh? And we need to find this very clearly, because one of the things why we lost this war is because 85% Armenians from Armenia never been in Artsakh. And let's talk about this also openly, honestly. Can you imagine the country was so proud, the nation was so proud to have Artsakh is independent, and 85 or 80% more never been in Armenia, from Armenia to Artsakh, because they didn't feel it's a part of Armenia. By the way, many, I don't put the numbers, but many Armenians today is very happy that Artsakh is not anymore Armenian problem. It's a problem for Russia, it's not Armenian problem. This is why we have a serious issue about identification, who we are, what is our homeland, what is the state, and where is the state needs to become strong, and how we can make the strong state for each territory. How in 21st century, when we're going with virtual technology, a lot of offline, online issues, we can keep this identity, especially with national issue again about what is the people who living in Armenia, is Yazidis is Armenians or not, or is a Muslim Armenians Armenians or not. We have some very tough, serious question, for example, which we need to answer. We have more from 2 to 3 million Armenians in Turkey who is Muslimized, and they have Armenian DNA. Do we want to keep them and bring them back or not? Do we ready to Western Armenia become back? Let's assume Turkey opened the border. You know, I made this announcement. We're preparing the fund, which we'll hope to raise $1 billion to be doing investment in the Western Armenia as soon as the border will be open, to show Turks that we're not only not scared about they're coming to Armenia, but we will be starting to rebuild our culture heritage and our homeland territory to make this investment and buying lands and doing the factories as soon as the border will be open. This is a very important message from my point of view, to sending people saying, you know what, guys, we don't care about what you're talking. We are ready for building our historical land back to us. But this is a request of serious commitment and most importantly, courage from the elite to lead this nation to this direction. Otherwise, we'll lose everything. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This idea with the fund we were talking about identity and unifying, that might actually win interest and sort of attention from a lot of latent but interested professionals in the Western diaspora, right? The Western Armenian diaspora. So, all right, I'd like to thank our audience. I'd like to thank our speakers, Ruben, Vardanyan, Nuné, Alekyan. Thank you very much. Very interesting session, very interesting discussion. We hope you will stay in touch with us. We will be back soon. I think our next event is coming up later in the month as far as the association goes, but then the major event is in June. So again, thank you very much for this interesting conversation. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.